Hello to all my people, and if you're watching live, checking us out on YouTube, or listening on your favorite podcast provider, you are most definitely my people. Welcome to another episode of Botched and Share Shots. I'm your host, a chef by trade and a mark by choice. I am the Will Gray, and joining me tonight is the Rabid Honey Badger, Ryan Mooney. Ryan, thanks for coming on and chatting about some wrestling, brother. How are you?
I'm doing just fine this evening. I've got my lovely black cherry sparkling water here to quench my thirst. While we talk about some wrestling and some life and all that stuff. And as always, got a little bit of rabies too, as a rabid honey badger should and would. So I'm doing good, all things considered. How about yourself?
I can't complain, man. It's a good, easy Wednesday. These are always nice and chill. Got some wrestling on in the background. Talking shop. Are you a sparkling water person over like soda?
Yeah. I try to as far as like health and just like appearance wise, diet wise, I try to have a little something sweet, but something that doesn't have any sugar in it. So that's kind of my go-to thing, or my poison of choice would be black cherry seltzer water.
I tried to give up like sodas, and that's the vice I can't do, man. I live and breathe Dr. Pepper. It's the elixir of my life. Like I can get up and run and go to the gym and work out, but for some reason I can't get rid of Dr. Pepper. Of all the things in my life that stick around, Dr. Pepper's the one. Um,
Mm,
so let's kind of like jump right into it, man. I always start with early exposure. It's kind of like what we watched as kid. I grew up in Nashville, late 80s, early 90s. I watched the tail end of the NWA, the birth of WCW, all the way through the Attitude Era. What about you? What did you grow up watching? What was some of the early exposure you had with pro wrestling?
Yeah, so I grew up in '95. So when, kind of the Attitude Era was going on, and it was the war between, Nitro and Monday Night Raw. And when wrestling was really big in the cultural zeitgeist, I was really, really super young. I was almost too young to even be aware of what was going on. It wasn't until afterwards, when we kind of got into the ruthless aggression, side of things, that I was exposed to wrestling for the first time ever through video games, actually. It's kind of interesting, like some people, they go to a live event for the first time with like a family member or a friend, and that's how they see it. Some people just watch it on TV right from home as a kid. And for me, it was through video games. I had a really close friend, a really close childhood friend who I'm still friends with now, who I would go to his house after school every day because we lived close to each other. And I would go and play SmackDown Here Comes the Pain in his house with him and his older cousin. And I just remember like being so enamored and so fascinated with the roster of all of these unique characters, right? It was like playing a game, any other game to me, like Street Fighter or something like that. All of these wacky, zany characters, different move sets, different, theatrics, different costumes, different, some of them were masks, some of them had huge muscles that were bigger than my head, but all of them had this unique factor about them that made them stand out. So I started learning more about who the guys were through the games. And when I got a little bit older, then I would start to gravitate and find it on TV, and then kind of dive a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole. So for me, it all started with, video games like Shut Your Mouth, Here Comes the Pain, the SmackDown versus Raw game. So that's really where my love for professional wrestling really kicked off.
Do you still play video games at all?
When I have the time, of which my free time is very scarce these days, with not just doing wrestling, but also my hobbies and my work outside of wrestling. But I do still play video games from time to time when I'm able to, and it's something that I hope to pursue as a hobby, maybe into the summer when I have more downtime away from work.
One of my the questions I like to ask, it always talks about work-life balance, because you bring that up. It's the old homage of what is free time. My catchphrase I use for myself is a chef by trade and a mark by choice, because before this and before I did anything in journalism, I spent, the better part of 15 years as a chef in the culinary field. And it's always tough to find a work-life balance in any field, especially when you dive headfirst into it. What was it like kind of finding that balance for you in the wrestling world, though?
At first, it was pretty difficult because for a long time, the only thing I ever wanted to do with my life was be a professional wrestler. when my friends, because like obviously, I think everybody at some point in their life likes professional wrestling, right? Like they said in during the Monday Night Wars, right? Like everyone and their mother was a fan of wrestling at one point, right? My friends and I all liked wrestling, and as we grew older, they grew out of it. I didn't, and I just kept kind of falling deeper in love with it as I learned more about the layers and the nuances and the intricacies and the moving parts. And even when I was in college, because I went to college because my parents told me that's kind of just what you do, right? It's like the normal expectation for somebody is to go to college, go to trade school, do something like that, receive some kind of education. And I remember it, being in my third year of college and still having that wrestling itch and feeling like I need to give this a shot. And if I don't, I feel like I'm going to wake up someday way down the line, with wrinkles on my face, a body that's, kind of been, broken down by age or, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. And then I won't be able to. I'll have missed my window of opportunity. So when I got into wrestling, I really had no career aspirations. I was a kid who was going to college to get a bachelor's degree in psychology because that's what I was interested in learning about was psychology, like outside of wrestling. In academia, for me, it was like the social sciences. And then I started realizing that I had interests outside of wrestling. So I decided to like put my psychology background to use. And then I went into, learning how to be a counselor and a therapist. And that's what I kind of do on the side as my work job, the job that helps me pay the bills and helps fund my wrestling aspirations, which I also love very much and gives me something else that wrestling doesn't give me. But wrestling also gives me something that doesn't give me. So it's very difficult, but I say that anything worth doing is never easy. And I think, if you really love something, like you'll find a way to make it work in your life in some capacity. It may not be exactly the perfect ideal situation that you would like it to be, right? Like in your wildest fantasies, but you'll find a way to make it happen if you really want it bad enough. And that's kind of what I've been able to do, is I go to work Monday through Friday, I work my regular job, and then my free time is dedicated to working on promos or, in-ring training or traveling and going to shows. So it's very difficult, but I feel like I've really found a flow and I'm really happy about that. I feel like my life has achieved a greater state of stability because of that.
So you were like, okay, one day you woke up and you were like, I'm going to be a pro wrestler, and you decided to go into the training side of things. Doing my due diligence, doing my work, I found out you spent some time with the Ring of Honor Dojo. Did you start your training at the dojo, or did you, start somewhere else and then progress to the dojo?
Yeah, so I mean the story behind that is, summer of around 2016, that was that time that I was in college that I was telling you about earlier. I was looking for schools because I felt like I was going to take a chance on myself and just try it. And if it didn't work out, then at least I gave it a shot, an honest shot. So I was looking for schools that are near me, and I'm New Jersey based, right? So I think I literally just typed into Google like top 10 wrestling schools in America. And one of a bunch of the different schools came up, and one of them was the Ring of Honor Dojo, which I found out was like 30 minutes away from where I lived.
That's pretty convenient.
So super convenient. I was like,
Yeah.
is this really happening? This feels like justification, a perfect rationalization. Like there's really no excuse not to go here. And it's got such a rich legacy. A lot of the wrestlers that I was inspired by, guys like the Punks, the Danielsons, the Samoa Joes, all of those guys, all at some point kind of came through Ring of Honor or even were trainers at that school at one time. So it had a rich history. And the unfortunate part was, though, when I was looking for the schools, I found out that the Ring of Honor Dojo was on hiatus and they weren't taking any new students. So I was deflated. I was disappointed. But I also found another school close to me in the area. It was the CZW Academy, which is also in New Jersey. And I was about to kind of email CZW Academy and ask to tour the school and to like sit in on a class to see what it's like. And then I saw the Ring of Honor Dojo post that they were opening up after, I think, like 5 years or 4 years, and that they were taking its first class. They were taking their first class in years, and it was going to start on my 21st birthday. So I was like, I'm not into superstitions or, the stars aligning or anything like that, but it really legitimately felt like as close to one of those situations as you could get to. And the reason why I started too, which I always bring this up because I like to give credit where credit is due, is around the same time that I was looking for wrestling schools, my mom, who I love very, very much, unfortunately had been diagnosed with breast cancer around that time. And the reason why I tell that story is because I was going to put off going to wrestling school for 6 months or more, and who knows, maybe indefinitely if I had pushed it back. And my mom, all the credit in the world, somebody who was going through her own challenges in the moment when I told her I was going to stay home and I was going to try and help her out and take care of her, take some stuff off her plate. All she could say to me in the moment was, go chase your dream now and don't put it off, because look at what life can throw at you, right? Like things can be going fine 1 minute and then not okay the next. You never know what's going to happen. So go do it now. Don't wait. And I went to the Ring of Honor dojo after, based on her blessing. And I went and I met the guys who trained me, and the rest was history. So I'm a product of the Ring of Honor dojo and the Ring of Honor system from the ground up. And I'm very proud to represent them wherever I go.
First, as a cancer survivor, big props to the battle your mom had. That's never easy for anybody. So I take that word very seriously. So I respect that for sure. And if it wasn't, as weird as this is going to sound, if it wasn't for me getting sick, I'd probably be still spending 70 or 80 hours a week in the kitchen. Like it's so weird how life changes and things come at you like that. So when you got in and you got to train and you were part of that system and you worked through it, what was it like when you got the contract? You were tenured, like you had a career with Ring of Honor. What was it like getting that contract, that first one, and being like, oh shit, like here I am. This is where I am now.
Yeah, it was one of those, honestly, it was one of those moments that it didn't really feel real when it was happening, because, when I went into it, I felt like I was a kind of a realist, right? I never got into it expecting to become, a Ring of Honor wrestler or a superstar or anything like that, right? And I wanted to wrestle, maybe just even wrestle a match, just one. And if I had just done that and it ended after that, I think that it still would have felt like it was worth it, right? But when I started training and, I was under the learning tree of, the people who trained me from the ground up, like Cheeseburger and Delirious and a guy who was also in Ring of Honor at the time, Will Ferrara, all three of them together. I felt like I had such good instruction and such good coaching, and I felt like I was naturally picking up a lot of what they were teaching me. It didn't feel very alien to me like I was expecting it to. And I think a lot of it had come from like my own, like, involvement in sports and like athletic background, like in high school and like, even before. So things just started picking up naturally. I was learning more. I was adapting to it relatively easily. I ended up having my first match after like 6 months of training. And everyone's different. Some people, it takes them that long. Some people, it takes a year, 2 years. It could take anybody any length of time. And I remember too, the thing that made me feel really good about myself was I went to a what was called a Ring of Honor tryout at the time, where they would do seminars where experienced wrestlers would come to the dojo to try out and try to get a spot in Ring of Honor. And they would have a panel of people there kind of like critiquing you, right, on promos or in the ring. So like the Briscoes and, Jay Lethal and, the big guys in Ring of Honor at the time were there kind of evaluating you. And, I was told not to go and actually try out, but to go as if I was trying out to get the experience. And I was there like in a group of people. I was there with guys like, Flip Gordon and MJF, right? Like people who were seasoned, experienced wrestlers. And I was just nobody, like this guy, just the guy who had no experience and was just trying to learn as much as possible. And I'll never forget, like, some of the guys who were the actual wrestlers, like on the panel and also in the class, like had come up to me and been like that was kind of like your first like experience like wrestling a match, like just here, like in front of this. And I was like, yeah, I really don't have much experience, but I did the best that I could. And they were like, wow, you're doing really good for somebody who's so like early on. Like seriously, like, keep your head up and like keep pushing forward. So that really helped me motivate me to go and keep going and keep trying my hardest to dig deeper. And finally, when I got the contract, when it was about 2 years from that point, I was like, holy crap, I'm a contracted professional wrestler. Like I am a professional wrestler.
Like
Like
that's the goal,
I'm being
right?
paid to
Like that
do
seems
this, right?
everybody's goal is to get the contract.
Exactly, right? It's something
Yeah.
that people work their entire careers for and are very talented and very skilled and sometimes still don't get to that point. So I felt so grateful and just so completely over the moon. It's something that I will never forget. My time there is so special to me, and that's just something that I'm always going to hang my hat on, is being able to say that I was a professional wrestler for Ring of Honor.
While you were there were a couple keynotes that I wrote down, and it's my show, so I get to pick what I want to talk about, right? There was a
Of course,
few
isn't that what?
points. One of them is you got to work and be part of. I'm not a big fan of this because when Tony Khan coined this term, it almost made it sound like it wasn't supposed to happen, and that's the forbidden door. I think when you look back throughout the history of wrestling through the territories, one of the things that made that style of wrestling thrive, in my opinion, was the willingness for JCP to work with Georgia, to work with WCCW. You didn't cross streams, but they would share talent and stuff, like they worked together to get over in each territory. So I love when companies do that. You had a chance to be part of one of the New Japan shows with the Ring of Honor Super shows. What was it like to kind of get the international eyes on the product and work with some of these guys coming over from Japan?
Yeah, it was really cool, and we did that a few times, because Ring of Honor and New Japan would constantly do these like Global Wars or like War of the Worlds like tours, and then eventually we did the big New Japan ROH Madison Square Garden Super Show. But it was really fun anytime we got to kind of cross paths with New Japan talent. I remember a very fond memory that I have of this is when I was in a 6-man tag team with Cheeseburger. He, me, and our partner Eli Isom, who was also a big part of ROH in its original incarnation. We wrestled the New Japan Young Lions, who are trained by Shibata. So two guys that are there right now that you've seen probably even on AEW. Alex Coughlin, Clark Connors, I believe, who was on the Forbidden Door show last year, and then also Carl Fredericks, who now actually works for NXT, I believe,
Correct.
as
Yeah.
Eddie Thorpe or something like that. That was a really, really fun match, and I really enjoyed working with those guys and competing against them. And I feel like we were all still relatively in our infancy in regards to our potential. I would love to I know it's not possible now with everybody being separated, but part of me would really like to have that match back, but just in our current, incarnations, all of us, because I feel like we've all grown and progressed so much since that point. And I remember one time too, Clark was actually, I think after the match we had, we had come face to face, like head to head, and he had said, like, let's do this someday in New Japan, like kind of under his breath. And I was like, oh yeah, like I really hope that something like that ends up happening. But yeah, then too, like the other thing that stands out is we did the Madison Square Garden show, and all the New Japan talent was just all kind of together, clustered together with Ring of Honor, and I got to see some people that I had known before. Like Kevin Kelly was somebody that I really like and had given me a lot of good advice early on before he left to be the full-time New Japan commentator. And I remember we were going to be in this big battle royal they had like a big like rumble, I think, where all the guys and from both companies were a part of it, like on the pre-show. And Kevin Kelly came up to me and just said, he's like, "Hey, like this is Madison Square Garden. So when you go out there tonight, like when you go down the ramp, like take a second and look out there and really allow yourself to soak it all in. Because this is a moment that not a lot of people get to have. So make sure that you really, take it in for all it's worth." And when we got into the Rumble, we had like a little spot where we got eliminated by Bad Luck Fale, who threw us over the top rope. And it was a great experience. Anytime we ever got to interact with the guys from New Japan, I always thought it was super fun. And I hope that ROH now will continue to do that moving forward.
So working at MSG, one of my favorite questions is always, what's your favorite venue you've ever wrestled in? Because as a fan perspective, you think about some of them, the Memphis Coliseum, you think about, the Dallas Sportatorium, you think about these historic venues, and MSG is always up there on people's list. Do you, as a fan, think MSG is still the mecca of pro wrestling?
That's such a hard question to answer because there are so many venues that have such a rich wrestling legacy in their own right for different reasons, right? Like Madison Square Garden is one of those things where like it's just a famous venue in general, right? Like for wrestling, but also like sports, for everything else. Because I've been very fortunate not just to be a part of like Madison Square Garden, but I've also gotten to be in other really famous wrestling venues like 2300 Arena multiple times, and also Hammerstein Ballroom, right? And Center Stage, Atlanta, Georgia, where they used to do the WCW shows. So, I mean, I think that you could say that Madison Square Garden would be the mecca because of just how big it is in pop culture, right? And how renowned it is across the world. But I have to say, for me, the one that's most special, I think, is honestly 2300 Arena, because on a personal level, that's where I saw my first Ring of Honor show when I was a fan. And when I went there and I saw, what they called the best wrestling on the planet, and I honestly I would agree with what I saw at that time. To me, that's just something that'll always be so personal to me that my personal bias tells me that I have to put 2300 Arena up there ahead of MSG. But I understand that, it's different levels. But for me, it's got to be 2300 Arena, I think. And that's my personal bias, obviously.
The 2300, such a historic venue for not just wrestling fans and wrestling talent, but wrestling in general, because of what it represents, people that went through it, the things that happened there. Without a lot of those things, wrestling wouldn't be where it is today, arguably. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. One of the things that's specific to the 2300, though, is that Philly crowd. Even when you worked there, was there still that bloodthirsty Philly feel to the crowd when you worked the 2300?
Yeah, it was so interesting being on the other side of the guardrail in the 2300 Arena, because they are some of the most passionate wrestling fans that you will find anywhere in the world, right? Like, and you never know like what their reaction is going to be. They might completely eat up what you're doing and love it, or they might completely hate it. And you have no way of knowing one way or the other what it's going to be. And you just kind of got to get through the experience no matter what side you fall on. I've had both experiences where they have been, really passionate and into, the work that I was doing in the ring. And I've had matches, right, where it wasn't clicking as much with them, and then they weren't really into it. And, they're very vocal and they'll let you know. Right. So I'm grateful for having both of those experiences, though, because it made me a better wrestler. It made me a better competitor. And yeah, I would say, looking back in hindsight, I've experienced both, and I'm grateful for both of them as well.
So you brought up three Their bucket list places: Hammerstein, MSG, 2300. You've seen the three. We talked specifically about 2300. You said it was maybe your favorite venue, or the mecca, so to speak. But looking at it though, what was the biggest takeaway difference from the three very distinct crowds: New York, Philly, and Hammerstein? What was the biggest differences in the territories with the crowds?
I would say that they definitely came off different to me. The Philadelphia crowd, you kind of get the idea that these are some of the leftover, like, ECW fans, right, that are kind of matriculating, from those days, right, back in the original ECW days. So they have this like just this like raw like energy and passion that you could just it's infectious. Like it makes you more excited to like be performing in front of them, right? Like it makes you want to like up your game or like do something crazy because of how just animated they all are.
It's like
And
going to a punk rock or a heavy metal show.
Mhm.
That's kind of the way it comes across to me sometimes. You know what I mean? Like when you go to there's not an ECW now, but when you go to like a GCW or a CZW or something that's reminiscent of those ECW shows, especially in that arena, it's like a punk rock or a rock and roll. And I'm not saying that grungy rise, but it's very much that electric feel with the crowd. At least it was on my side of the guardrail.
Mhm. And I think there's also something to be said in the fact that if we're comparing, the Philly, 2300 to like Hammerstein or MSG, 2300 is very like intimate. It's very like tightly packed. Like everyone is kind of in there on top of each other. So it really does feel like you're at like a metal concert or like you're kind of like moshing or something like that, right? And in Hammerstein Ballroom, everybody's a little bit more like spread out. There's like the layers, right? The different balconies, which is a cool aesthetic in its own right because of like the architecture and stuff. But I would say there's just this energy that comes when all of these people are like so tightly squeezed together that you just can't kind of replicate in like a larger venue. And I think that's one of the other things that sets 2300 apart from some of the other ones as well is the closed in intimate nature of it all.
On a sad side of things, wrestling took a hit with the passing of Jay Briscoe. You had a chance to lock up with him when you guys were at Ring of Honor together. Can you give me a Jay Briscoe story, just to kind of shed some light on how great the man was? I was able to pass through a show with him a few times. I never worked. I'm not even saying that, but in the journalism side, he and I crossed paths a few times. Fantastic person. You got a Jay Briscoe story for me?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, so many like little and to me too, like the significance comes from these really little moments. Sometimes it's not like those long, drawn out, profound, in-depth conversations, but just those little moments that you share with people, those real little human moments. Um, I mean, I gotta say off the bat too. I mean, just Jay Briscoe is one of the most positive people that I've ever met in professional wrestling. And professional wrestling attracts a lot of people, right? Some of them good, some of them not so good, right? And Jay is one of those people that if you were at the top of the card, like the most important person in the company, he'd treat you like family. And if you were at the very bottom, like I was for a period of time, same thing, would treat you like family. And it was so refreshing to have that sense of camaraderie and community in Ring of Honor when we were all there together. And he is a big factor. He and his brother both, honestly, big factors into it feeling that way for all of us. Like we were all part of a team. We were all part of one big happy family. And I was very fortunate. I got to wrestle him more than once, which was an absolute, honor, no pun intended, and a privilege. And I remember one story, maybe a couple stories here, a couple small stories. I remember there was this one time that we were in Nashville and we were going to do, actually, I don't think we were wrestling each other that day, but we were in all Nashville together at a show. And I remember we were all kind of sitting around in a cluster and Jay wasn't there, but we were all near the bathroom and I saw him coming out of the bathroom, and just jokingly, I went up to him and I was like, "Hey Jay, what are you doing in there? You stinking up the bathroom for everyone else?" And he was like, "Yeah, baby, yeah, that's what I'm doing." So it's just one of those like little moments where there's just that fun like back and forth between two people. Um, there was this one time where Eli Isom and myself were going to wrestle the Briscoes at 2300 Arena in like it was a very short match. We were putting them over, making them look good. And they came up to us. We were nervous too. We were very nervous. Like we were not confident in ourselves at all yet. And I remember they came up to us and they reassured us. They said like, we're going to take care of you guys. Like we're going to make sure that we're going to go through and everyone's going to come out okay. And we're all going to be good. And that helped. That helped boost our confidence. That made us feel like we belonged. Like we weren't these two kids that were out of place. Like they made us feel important. And the last one that I remember, very vividly is there's this one time, I think it was one of the big pay-per-views where, I mean, Jay had just come back from one of his matches and we were all kind of celebrating in the locker room together. And he just turned to me, looked me dead in the eye, and put his hand on my shoulder and just said, "I love you, baby." And I told him I love you too. And I genuinely felt that way. I feel like he genuinely felt that way. And I'm very sad that I didn't get to see him before his unfortunate passing. We hadn't seen each other for a long time, but he's one of the people that in wrestling, I'm always going to remember having a positive influence on my career and my life. And I'm gutted on a personal level, but I'm also gutted for his family and all of the people that were left behind, unfortunately. But I have nothing but positive things to say about the man.
That was what I was trying to say, man. Like it's so you can't say a bad word about him. Like I said, I knew him. Like I wouldn't even say I know him. You know what I mean? But just the times in passing that I got to be in the same space. Genuinely such a cool guy. So on a brighter side of things, let's talk in-ring work for a second before we get ready to go home. When you do a match, you have in your career, you've worked hundreds of matches and there's different types of matches every single time, but I'm going to break it kind of down into three columns here: house shows, TV tapings, and a pay-per-view match. Just the question is, in a generalized form or format, do you approach the three different styles any differently? Do you have a TV taping, match times or stuff like that? Are they produced differently? Like, what's the biggest difference for you if a match is a house show versus a TV taping or a pay-per-view?
I would say that there comes a different level of kind of like creative freedom and inhibition across those domains. I like a house show when it's not being recorded. I mean, well, granted, these days, I mean, every kind of indie show is recorded in some way or streamed somewhere, so everything almost does feel like TV now in some way, shape, or form. But in regards to like a house show, I usually take that as an opportunity to be like, okay, look, I can try something new. I can experiment with something and see if it works. I can try to, maybe have just a little bit more fun, right? And be a little bit more like loose in regards to like my presentation and, my in-ring style. I really look at it as like a blank canvas. Like it's time for me to, just run wild with my paintbrush and kind of see, what sticks, right? What we could keep and maybe use for TV, and maybe what is, okay, like, as an idea, this was good, but in execution, it doesn't really work. So those opportunities are very, very important because those are what help get you prepared to be the best version of yourself on TV or on pay-per-view. Television, my mindset is always much, much different because, it's so tight. We're producing like this very, heavily structured product for TV. There are specific time cues that we have to meet. So that's the time where, okay, like everything that I do and I do well, like that's what I'm putting forward. Like that's the foot that I'm using to step forward with this. All of your stuff has to be dialed in. It has to be, you have to be able to execute it 10 times out of 10, because it's a heavy responsibility, right? Because there's so many people in wrestling, right? Everybody's looking for that kind of opportunity. And if you're fortunate enough to be in a spot like that, in my opinion, you owe it not just to yourself, but you owe it to every other person that's working towards that goal to make the most of that opportunity. I think that it's very important not to take that for granted, because as we've seen, right, like wrestling has ups and downs. Like one day you're on the top of the mountain, and the next day you could be on the come down, right? And seeing all those people that you saw on the way up. So I try to look at it as an opportunity to be the best version of me and to put forward to the audience what I can bring to the table and what I'm good at, right? Amplifying my strengths, hiding my weaknesses, and then, when I'm by myself on other shows, right, then I'm at the drawing board experimenting and trying new things. But that's kind of the difference, the different mindset that I take between the two.
So, if you could go back to the night of your first match, what would be one bit of advice you would give rookie Ryan?
Something that I would say to him, and honestly to anybody else who would ask me for advice who is just starting out, would be, I know that you have goals. We all have goals. We all have aspirations. We all have dreams. We all have these things that we're trying to check off our list. But don't get so wrapped up in worrying about where you want to go that you miss out on what's going on right in front of you. I the most the one of the best pieces of advice that I was given by a trainer that always resonated with me, and I can still very vividly remember it to this day. I think that's how much of an impact it had on me, was treating wrestling like a song, like listening to a piece of music. Nobody listens to a song just to jump all the way to the end, right? We listen to the song to ride the wave, to hit every note, to hit every beat, to go on the ride of the ups and the downs, right? And then we get to the end naturally after we've made it through every other step to get to that point. And that's the same way that I try to approach my own wrestling journey, and that I would encourage others to do the same, is live each moment, get the most out of each moment, because you won't get the opportunity to relive it. You won't get it back. So make sure that when you do have those moments, make sure to fully absorb them. Make sure to not take them for granted, because those are the things you're going to look back on someday. I'm anticipating this for myself, looking back on those someday and really being like, wow, like what a wild ride it was. And I'm so glad that I had fun and that I enjoyed it while it was happening. So I've caught myself a few times, and it's impossible not to do this from time to time. We're all human, right? We're all very goal oriented, right? When you accomplish something, you want to just move on to the next thing and just keep going, 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 going. But it's perfectly fine to stop every once in a while and smell the roses, right? Because that's really what it's all about, is that those moments. So that's what we're all doing it for, is the moments. So enjoy them while they're there. That's what I would say.
All right, Ryan. Here it is, man. I close all of my interviews with 5 random questions that yours don't have anything to do with wrestling. Your 5 have absolutely. I was checking to see. So I've got your 5 queued up. You ready?
Oh yeah, let's do it. Love it.
If you go to Subway, what's your go-to sub?
Okay, if I'm going to Subway, I'm getting a sandwich with roasted chicken, pepper jack cheese, and some kind of spicy like sauce, like some kind of hot sauce or buffalo sauce. And then I'm putting all the vegetables on it that I can, including some really hot like yellow banana peppers.
Love spicy peppers. Did you have a crazy high school life, or were you kind of like docile and with your studies? Because it seems like, a lot of
Uh,
people either like went a little crazy in high school or they were kind of more reserved. Which side of the coin were you?
Oh, I would say it was a happy medium, a mix of both. I had definitely had my moments of craziness and debauchery, but a lot of times too. I mean, I'm a very much an introverted person, so I also a lot of times kept to myself. Worked on my academics, but there were a few times that I made some dumb mistakes that I probably shouldn't have. But I live to tell the tale, and I look back on them as funny stories. So I would say it's probably a mix of both of them.
A lot of times I say I'm an introvert who pretends to be an extrovert.
I would agree. I would say the same thing about myself.
What's your dream car?
Dream car. Well, the funny answer to that would be just a car that works because my car constantly breaks down and it's a money pit and I dip money into it all the time and I hate it. But dream car, I mean, if I could have any car in the world, I'd love a car with the doors that kind of like go up like straight instead of just coming out. I mean, how cool is that? I mean, I'd love
Like the
that, like
DeLorean from what was it? Back to the Future, where like the wings they come up on the side.
yeah, or I was thinking like a Lamborghini as like a very expensive car, but
Oh yeah, with like the
DeLorean,
wing doors. Those are cool too. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
DeLorean though, I would say since you said DeLorean, I'm thinking DeLorean. As long as it has a flux capacitor on it, so I can go backwards or forwards in time, then that's my dream car. Then there we go.
uh, do you have a preference between Pepsi or Coke?
Um, yes, I like Coke better, but I like Coke Zero and specifically Cherry Coke Zero the best. So that's mine.
Final one. Do you know your Harry Potter house?
Yes, my Harry Potter house. The people have told me very much. They said that Hufflepuff, like the actual icon or the symbol, is a honey badger or a badger. So I feel like as the Rabid Honey Badger, I should fit right in Hufflepuff, right?
That makes sense. Now that you say that, I'm like, huh, that fit perfectly. All right, Ryan. This is my favorite part of the episode, man. I don't have to say anything. I just get to sit here, plug your stuff, put yourself over, tell everybody where to find you on your socials and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Rabid Ryan Mooney. That's where I post all of my upcoming events. I've got some stuff that just dropped today. Um, this weekend I'm going to be at Ridgefield Park, right? So I'm going to be at another place called the Mecca, wrestling a show. So come on out to that if you're in the area. Next weekend I'm going to be wrestling in the Super 8 tournament. I'm super excited about that. Big history, great lineage of that tournament. So many people that I was inspired by have come through it. So I'm definitely looking forward to being a part of that. And yeah, I've got some other stuff in the works, possibly maybe some TV stuff coming down the line. So just look at my social media and you'll get updated on where I'm going to be and what I'm going to be doing. And also, if you would like to support me at some point, please feel free to go to prowrestlingtees.com, type in Ryan Mooney, and you can buy one of my 2 awesome t-shirts. Okay, if you would like to support me in any way, shape, or form.
Well, Ryan, I appreciate you taking some time out on your Wednesday, man, and stopping by and chatting about some wrestling with me.
Hey, absolutely, man. This was an absolute pleasure. I love coming on and talking about wrestling and just talking about life with people. I think it's one of the coolest parts of the wrestling experience. So I'm grateful that you had me on. It was a real pleasure.
Excellent, man. Well, I appreciate you. For the Rabid Honey Badger Ryan Mooney, I am the Will Gray. Thanks for stopping by and listening, my people.